Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Bear with me. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. I've never done a tutorial in my life. So if you find this completely useless, I will not be offended. Feel free to turn off and get on with the rest of your life, and I won't be offended at the least. But basically, last December, I posted some photos on the Aliens vs Predator Facebook page of my latest little painting project, which was these guys plus the rest of my army, which I'd put together for One Page Rules Grimdark Future, which also does a Predator list in their game system. And surprisingly, one of the moderators from that site got in touch with me and asked me to do some kind of tutorial to show how I had achieved this paint job. Not that it's particularly skilled or amazing. This is all just a load of cheap tricks which make it look like I know what I'm doing. So with that in mind, I cobbled together a bit of few bits and pieces, and I'm now recording my first ever tutorial on a mobile phone. This is probably going to go very, very wrong, but for those of you that find any use out of this, let's get going. So, to begin with, there is no fancy techniques, equipment or anything. There's no airbrushes involved. There's no blending. There's no wet palettes. There's no fancy highlight tricks or anything. This is really just basically a version of that slap chop, which a lot of gamers have been talking about recently. Just letting the model effectively paint itself. So what we're going to start with, we're going to move these bad boys out of the way. These are some of my completed examples. And we're going to start with this young lady here, who I've basically already spray painted grey. No special paint. It's literally this stuff from my local pound shop. Nothing special. Put that back where it belongs. This was a 3D print from Papsicle Miniatures. I think it's one. You can find them on My Mini Factory. And there she is. A simple female predator with smart disc, wrist blades and plasma caster. And the very first thing after spray painting a grey, liquid talent, Nuln Oil. Little trick I like to do, because of course these pots never stay open, do they? They'll keep closing in. So I have one of these little tubes, protectors that come with paintbrushes. I simply tuck that behind and the lid stays open. What do you know? So, and all we do, taking an old brush, it doesn't have to be, actually the older brush the better really, because it's just going to cover a lot of ground, and we're literally just going to slather this Nuln Oil over. The only reason I use Games Workshop paints and not some of the others like Army Painter, Too Thin Coats, etc. is very simple. I've got a Games Workshop store just down the road. It's therefore easier for me to find replacement bits and pieces. If I run out of a paint and I'm using Games Workshop paints, I can literally pop down to my local store and pick up a replacement. So you'll already see there is no talent required here whatsoever. If I go out of focus, off lens or anything, I apologise. As I say, I'm literally filming this on my mobile phone, and I have never done anything like this before in my life. So, have a look at that. It's slathered on there. Again, no talent required here whatsoever. There's no precision or anything. You're literally just slopping it on there, and you really want to slop it on there. The only thing to then watch out for is as it starts to dry, you might want to come back and remove pooling. So for example, leave it standing for a bit, and over the next 10 minutes or so, you may find it start to pool around the bottom of the feet, etc., or around the crutch or other low areas where gravity takes it, and it starts to get rather thick. And all you then do is you simply take your brush and you wick it away and spread it back over other areas, just to make sure you got a nice even coat, and there's no missed bits or anything like that. Right? And that's all you do for that stage. So step 2 is the dry brush section. As you can see, I've got the example, we've got the washed version, and you can see how they're already starting to get more detail. So now we've gone from base coat to a now dried, non-oiled version, and we're going to dry brush. I personally am going to be dry brushing using Corax white. Any white will do, your own preference really. You need basically a big, chunky, soft brush. This is simply I don't know why I get these. These come with my printer, 3D printer resin actually, from Elegoo. I don't know why they put a little brush like this in with their printer resin, but I find these great for dry brushing. Nice and soft, wide bristled. So let's have a crack. So starting off, I'm going to apologise if we go out of focus or anything, because I have never filmed with a camera between me and my models before, and I'm literally a bit of the white and literally getting rid of all of it on the paper here. And we simply start, you've probably already seen this kind of stuff before, just dry brushing over it. And you can see you already start getting a load of the detail. Don't worry about overdoing it. The only thing you've got to worry about is having too much paint on your brush, and then you end up with streaks and blotches. It's better to have the brush too dry and have to go back again than it is to have the dry brush too wet with paint and end up with great big streaky blotches. So we're literally now just going back. I'll get some more on that on there. Just as tiniest dab. Get rid of it off of there, and again, and we'll and basically we're not just doing a light dry brush. We are going to dry brush the hell out of this girl. The reason for that is because we're going to be using the old contrasts on top of this. You could use obviously speed paint, Army Painter speed paint, etc. Other companies are now starting to do these very translucent paints. So we're going to be painting over the top of this with those translucent paints, and the idea is simple, that we're effectively doing all of our pre-shading and highlighting before, rather than the traditional method of painting a base colour, then shading over the top of that, and then highlighting over the top of that. The problem with that, with what we're doing now, is that the paints will always end up darker than they actually look in the paint pot, because obviously they're going over grey or black. So we really want the details to really be picked out with as much dry brushing as possible. I'm not too worried about the metal areas, although I'm still going to do all those areas for completeness, because the main reason I'm not worried about too much about making sure the metal areas are heavily dry brushed is because they were painted using metallics, which doesn't tend to lend itself as well, I found, to the slap chop method. But we are certainly going and really going for deep, and if need, but really work it in there. As I say, it's always better to have too dry a brush and have to keep going back, just the slightest dab. Remove as much as possible and keep building it up in this very simple method than it is to end up with too wet a brush and find you've just splodged a load of white over all that beautiful detail. No. I mean, as I said earlier, the model paints itself really. So no skill has been involved in this. There we go, let's remove that from the screen, make sure it's all nice in focus. So there we go. See, we now basically have a model that goes from black through grey to white. We have a black and white model. We have the negative effect, or, well, you know, negatives are in reverse, aren't they? But we have basically all of our shading and highlighting has now already been done. Okay, quick apology for the last bit of footage. My lights here weren't turned on, so if it was a bit dark, I apologise. As I say, completely new to all this. So now you've got your black and white model. Next step is the actual colouring it in, basically. Now, quick word on that. Let's move her out of the way for a sec. If you do the traditional painting that I grew up with back in the late 80s, early 90s, you would have painted a base colour, then you'd have shaded it, and then you'd have highlighted it. So if you wanted, say, green, you'd have painted it the green you wanted to look like, then you would have shaded it with a darker green, and then you would have highlighted, usually with dry brushing, with a lighter green, right? And it would generally look like that one in the middle, but with shading in the recesses and highlights on the raised areas. But when you're dealing with contrasts and this method, you forget that. Don't start with the middle cut. If that's what you wanted to look like, you go the next shade up. You start with the highlight colour, because that's what it's going to look like on the white areas, the raised areas. That's what it's going to generally look like on the grey, and it's going to look that, or even potentially darker, in the recessed areas that are dark grey to black. So instead of picking the colour you want, go the next shade up. You basically want to colour it in with the highlight colours. With that in mind, we're going to do the skin on our Predator now. And I've chosen to go with, in this case, Plague Bearer Flesh. Simply because it looks a bit more lizardy. But of course, your Predators can be any colour you want. Whatever you like. So, I'll give it a nice little shake. And again, do my old trick. Bit of tubing to keep the lid open. And now this is the only bit where you have to really start being careful. But again, we're not messing around with any particular real fancy skills. We're literally, and I'm hoping I don't get out of focus here. If I do, I apologise. So we're literally just painting over. Now, when contrasts were first brought out, you were taught, especially in the Games Workshop store I was visiting, to slather this stuff on, and it would all start collecting in the recesses and shading itself. With this method, you're not putting it on thick. You're literally just putting a simple, thin coat on. Nothing special. The only trick is just to avoid painting it where you don't want the green. It's not really rocket science, and I'm trying. My apologies for any the base all gets in the way or anything like that, or I'm out of focus. So basically, as you can see, There's just the leg section there. Let's get it back into focus. All I've done is I've literally just painted a layer of this Plague Bearer's flesh over the leg. And you can automatically see how it's starting to come together. You're even getting, on this particular model, the mottled skin effect on the thighs. All the muscle definition is already there. So we start going to do the foot next, I think. Ta-da. And we just put it in there. I'm not going to put it on the claws. I'm going to do that different colour, the tone things. But try and get it into focus for you. Without spoiling the shot. I'm finding out, I now know why YouTubers have such a problem trying to do these tutorials, because you see, the thing is, I'm used to being able to put the model exactly where I want in front of my face. However, this time I've got a mobile phone between me and the model, and I have to consider what the phone can see, not necessarily what I can see. And it's not that easy. But if you bear with me, hopefully we'll get there in the end. Well, yeah, it's all on the screen. Yeah, good. Right. And again, the model is painting itself. All we're literally doing is like we used to do as kids, painting between the lines. That's all you're doing. Just, in your colouring book, making sure that you just paint within the lines, and the model does the rest for you. It's that simple, really. So there we go. Just make sure it's nicely on there. And one of the things to do is also start off with the lighter colours you want. So, for example, I have started off with the lighter green. I intend to do things like these pauldron areas here. Oh, the pauldrons on the shoulders, aren't they? Whatever this armour is, I intend to make that some kind of leathery hide thing, right? So if that's going to be darker. So if I accidentally, like you see here, I've accidentally gone over the top of there, that's not going to be a problem, because I'm going to go over that with a darker brown. That's not going to be a problem. So again, if you do the lighter colours first, things just go a lot easier. All right, reposition that. Oh, another thing, you don't have to paint on metal stalks like this. The only reason I've done this is because, two reasons. One, it makes it a bit easier to show the whole model off on the camera lens. Normally, I'd have just stuck it to a base and painted it on the base. And two, I haven't decided what base I'm going to put this girl on yet. So, because of that, I haven't printed the base off yet. Again, the wonders of 3D printing give you so many options. I've just, over time, just built up a load of files of all different things. I'll probably put her on a industrial base, because A, that fits in with the rest of my current Predator force, and B, my local gaming club will be running a table at Salute later this year, and I've got to put together a small Predator kill team for our demonstration table, and that is going to be in an industrial zone. So I'll probably have this girl with a few Predator hounds as one of the kill teams running around. We're going to be using the Space Weirdos rule set. Right, there we go. Just now, you'll notice here we got little straps above the thong, for basically, for want of a better description. Don't worry about getting we can paint over them, because as I say, because we've done the lighter colour first, we can come back with our brown for our leather thongs, etc. Later on, and just go over that light green, and it's not going to be a problem. Little thin details like that, it's not going to be anything we're going to lose any sleep over. I'm going to obviously miss the main bulk of clothing, but very thin straps like those, very thin straps like those, I'm not too worried about. But the general clothing there, I am going to avoid. There we go. Right, I'm going to do the rest of this girl's skin off camera, and we'll come back when we're ready to do the next step. Okay, so next step, we're just going to do the claws. This is a really short bit here. So we're going to get some skeletal horde, and we're literally just going over the toe claws. Probably don't need to do the under bit because that's going to go on the base. This is one of the few bits we're going to highlight later on, simply because the method, so this slap chop style method, does darken things down, and I want the claws to be nice and bony white. So you can always go in afterwards and highlight a bit later on, and I'm going to be doing that with these claws. But if you, just like with the skin tone earlier, if you pick your colours as light as possible, then after time you don't have to do that bit. And quite frankly, most of that is already done. I can't think of anywhere. I'm not going to bother doing the little toe claws there, and conveniently she's got her fist clenched there, so we don't see any claws at the end of those fingers. So that is, oh no, we got one there which we missed. Right, there we go. Just put that on there. Let's say what we'll do, we'll highlight this later on with some wraith bone probably. But there you go, that's the next section done. Okay, so next step, the leather work, and we're going to again start the lighter colours first. So we're going to Agaron's Dunes. My apologies for any mispronunciations here. And so, as I said earlier, we're going to start with these leg guards. Now, traditionally, you'd have done this in snakebite leather, and I'll probably be doing the individual straps that hold it all together in snakebite leather, just so there's, different colour, more than one type of brown on this model. But again, let's try and go a little lighter, because the whole grey to black underneath tends to darken it down a lot. You can already see, effectively, you've already got nearly all the detail already there. Right, let's do this bit here, and again, so we're just going to be careful along the edges. Again, sorry, getting out of the camera shot there. Now, remember earlier I said I accidentally went over the edge with the green onto the I intended to put the brown. So this is why we start with the lighter colours and just get progressively darker, because that darker colour now completely hides that slight mistake. And now, unless you're looking at it under a microscope, and even then you're pretty hard pressed to see it, but in general you would not know that that mistake had been made. Now I'm keeping this scheme particularly simple. I mean, you could have multiple different colours of clothing here, but another reason why I chose this model is it is relatively simple as to what she's wearing, so it keeps the tutorial that much simpler. But the things like this strap here and the thong straps there, I'm going to do them in the darker tone of snakebite leather, just so there's a little bit of variety. Quite frankly, you probably, if it's your only model and it's part of a small kill team or something like that, or something where it's going to be, my apologies, the centre of attention, then you want to do all these extra detail, different colours and all that. If it's part of a full-blown army, like for example in One Page Rules, Grim Dark Future, for example, then quite frankly, just to do it all one type of brown will probably be sufficient, because it's going to be one of a unit of 6 predators. You're going to have about 5 or 6 more units, so you're talking 30 plus predators. Nobody's going to notice that, the straps on one predator are a darker colour than the actual clothing on it. However, you go to the level of detail you want, and that, I think, I should really pay. I'm going to literally do these, although these are skull necklaces, I am literally going to do these Agrax brown, simply because I don't want to bother going back to the skeletal horde, and B, it's in such a dark recessed area, we're just going to pick them out with a bit of wraithbone later on, and you quite frankly won't notice the difference. Okay, so now onto the snakebite leather, and you'll notice I've already done a few bits and pieces, like on the strap here. Oh, missed a little bit there. Let's touch that up a little bit. There you go. This is because I'd actually started filming this bit before the postman called at my front door, so I had to stop there and restart this. Yeah, right, so as I said earlier, we don't have to worry too much about having painted over these bits of the thong, because we're going over in a darker colour. You'll soon see, although at this zoomed in level my painting looks terrible. Once you zoom out, and of course the contrast starts to settle in all the grooves, etc., as it is designed to do, you won't notice any real discrepancies. We're just going to quickly go over. I think I'm getting better at keeping this in shot as this video goes on. Now you won't notice a huge difference because it's already a dark part of the model in there, because we didn't get much dry brushed white into that dark area of the model, so you won't notice a great deal of difference anyway. It's only just because I'm a little bit pedantic and wanted to have a different colour brown, but there, put that will probably be just having a good look at anywhere else we want. Now I think we were done on our darker brown, So what we'll go on to next, because we're going to leave our metallics last, we're going to go on to, I think, the dreadlocks. So just as I mentioned earlier, when you're dealing with contrasts, if you want something to look a particular colour, paint it the next shade lighter. So we want black dreadlocks. That means we're going for grey contrast. In this case, we're going for basilicum grey. Do my usual trip, give it a good shake. Put my tube, keep it open. Right, so let's start with the dreads. Because obviously, in the recessed areas, it will come out as virtually black, but on the raised areas, you'll see grey. Now, this is another bit where you may find a chance to save a bit of, let's say for example, you want to do an elder dreadnought, an elder predator rather. Well, one of the defining factors of the elders, usually in the films or the cartoon book, comic books, etc., is they tend to have grey dreadlocks. It's one of the few ways you can actually show one of them's actually old. Well, simple solution that. You can do like I did with my elder. Yeah, I just left it as it was. I didn't put any contrast over it. That is, those dreadlocks are the base grey spray paint with the Nuln Oil wash and then dry brushed with white, and I just left them as they were, and she ends up with grey dreadlocks. Now, that's not particularly striking, and you can always do, if you want, go touch up that with a little bit of a dry brush. I'm not going to, because when I do the jewels in her hair, etc., they'll stand out more. But it's entirely up to you. You can always go over this with a light dry brush of grey just to really pick them out if you want. I'm going to leave that as it is. And we're going to go on to the next step, which I believe now should be all the metal work. So for most of the silver work, we're going to be, well, pretty much all the silver work, we're going to be using Leadbelcher from G-Dub. Out the side. So let's start off with the leg armour. Unlike the normal contrast paints, metallics, you don't tend to work as well using this particular method. I know some companies have attempted to bring out their own metallic speed paints or contrast equivalents. Army Painter is one of them. I missed a bit of brown now. I'll go back and do that in a minute. Bit of the old snakebite leather missing off the bottom of the strap there. But they just don't work as well for this particular painting method as the non-metallics do. So we're going to be doing probably a more traditional style of painting, but it's still slimmed down and easy as hell with no special talents involved. So now we've done all the silver work, let's go on to the gold jewels in her dreadlocks. And I'm using Retributor Armour for this one. So, a little bit, and all we're doing, literally just, fortunately, they're fairly small, and you don't really have to do it. Quite frankly, just the suggestion of them is usually enough. Because quite frankly, most people are going to be looking at the weapons, the biceps, and the mask when you have these on the table. You only really don't have to go too much on these bits, because A, they're usually at the back, and B, when somebody sees them, all they really want to see, oh yes, it's got dreadlocks and it's got those little metal bands in there that we all see in the comic books and on the films. And to be totally honest, half the time I usually miss the odd little jewel bit here. Don't always paint them all. Partly because I'm lazy, and partly because no one's ever going to notice. You know the direction on that one. You only really have to just touch on them initially. It's looking a bit messy at the moment, but that will change in a bit. Now, to make all that silver work look decent, we're going to go back to that liquid talent, i.e. Nuln Oil. And, oh, it's a little too much on that, bro. There we go. And we're just going to put this all over the silver work. So as I said earlier, the metallics don't tend to work well with the underpainting method here. So you do have to go back over the metallics with a wash to shade it. And just like earlier, lather it on, but make sure it doesn't pool. Unlike earlier, we've just been a little bit cautious as to only get it on the metalwork rather than the entire damn model. So now we're going to go over these dreadlock gems, which are only literally touched up with a bit of gold. We're just going to go over them now with some Reikland flesh, and we don't even have to be, because we're going on black dreadlocks, we don't have to be particularly fussy about this either. It's simply adding a little bit of depth to them. You start to see the shape of them now start to come out. As you can see, they're not just a lump of metal. They've now actually got some shape to them, and that starts to show up when you put the wash over them. That's all we're really doing. That already looks a lot better. As I say, there's no, I'm not I'm no competition painter or anything. This is all just for my gaming table. And these are all just little tricks I've learned to make it look like I know what I'm doing. And they'll look good enough for a gaming table. May not win you a golden demon or something equivalent, but there you go. Final step, we're just going to pick out some little details now. So obviously we got her little skull necklace in here. So I literally just got some wraith bone, and I'm literally just going to brush over the top of them. We're not doing any actual detail here. We're just hinting that there's something in there made of bone. So from the distance, somebody will know she's got a necklace on. I mean, under this massive magnification I've got this camera going at, hell, you can even see the layer lines of the print. But on a gaming table, all that needs to do is suggest that there's something there. And on her claws, now they were painted great initially, but I just want them a little brighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just brush across the top with some wraith bone, just to make them stand out a bit more. And just maybe and there. Try not to getting the way of the camera. Almost dry brushing, but not quite dry, if you know what I mean. And there we go. She's got some claws. And there we go, all done. Ready for her now to take her place amongst the rest of my collection. When I've printed off a suitable base for her, that is. So, to summarise, first off we did a base coat of basic cheap grey paint, did a Nuln Oil wash over the top of that, and then dry brushed over a light grey. In this particular case, we used Corax White. That does all the base highlighting for 90% of the model, with the exception of the metallic work. Then we went on to the contrast paints, always going for the highlight colour and not the base colour each time, and starting with the lighter ones working through to darker. So we started off with a lighter skin, then the light brown, and then the dark brown, and then we finished off on the grey for her dreadlocks. The next step was the metallic work. We painted the metallics, or in this case silver and gold, and then we did a wash over them, in this case Nuln Oil for the silver and Reikland Flesh for the gold. And then finally just pick out any minute details which just needed brightening up. Easy ways this scheme can be modified. So for example, if you want these models have a high level of contrast in their colours. So let's go for one of my elders here. Very, very dark recesses to her skin, very bright green to legs, etc. My Dishonored dude here. So yes, the abs really shown. Looks almost cartoonish in comic book style. And if that's okay for you, then great. If you want it a little bit more subdued than that, you can go one of two ways. If you want the highlights not as bright, simply go for a lighter white, more of a grey than a white for your highlighting. So instead of Corax White, highlight with a light grey and so forth. That will dull down your highlights for your entire model. If you want it looking brighter and the recesses and the shades not looking so dark, you can change the Nuln Oil wash for a brown, or even just leave it off entirely and just have dry brush white over the grey paint. That will bring up your darkened recesses, the shaded areas, so they won't look as dark as they do, say for example, on his calf muscles. That would be a very easy way of changing the whole look without actually changing much of this method. As I say, it's no fancy tools, no airbrushes, etc., no blending, no wet palette, blah 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 blah. If that's of any help to you, then you're welcome. If it's not, don't worry, I won't lose any sleep over it, because I'm not a professional painter. I just paint stuff to make it look decent enough on the gaming table, and then I have fun. So have fun. Outros are hard. Goodbye.